listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is author Jacquelyn Sill, author of Where the Water Rages. Jacquelyn's been married for 30 years, is a grandmother, and enjoys swimming, hiking, and reading. Welcome, Jackie. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Well, Jackie, I see the topic of your book is about human trafficking. So that's a very important subject. But how did you choose that topic?
In some ways, I know it's going to sound cliche, but it's almost like the topic, it kind of chose me. I mean, I had the idea for a type of book that I wanted to write as far as a conflict that a married woman might have with, as far as being in a marriage where she was maybe feeling frustrated and maybe really questioning her significance. And it was about that time that I was throwing around these ideas as far as the themes in my head that I took a trip to Thailand, and it was a last minute trip, and I traveled with 5 other people. And while we were on this trip, we were told that we were going to be kind of learning more about the trafficking that was happening there and just how the girls and the young boys were being rescued from those situations. And so we were really interested to know, to see what that was going to look like. Of course, when we arrived in Thailand, and the person who was our guide, he began to tell us that basically that kind of stuff didn't occur in Thailand.
Oh,
that it
interesting.
Doesn't happen. He was adamant. We were in Chiang Mai. He kept telling us this is a family city. It just doesn't happen.
So he's protecting his country, right? Yeah.
You know, I'm not really sure if because he has a really good heart, and he definitely is someone who wanted to, be helping orphans in every way possible. But I think that maybe he just genuinely, because he didn't see it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just don't understand why, what his motives were, but I don't think they were anything harmful. Maybe he just really wasn't aware how bad it was there.
Well, I'm sure there's people in the United States who would say we don't have human trafficking.
Oh, I agree completely.
So that's probably what it was. Yeah, they just don't know, right?
Right. And so while we were there, we were actually up near the border. We were up, we traveled across the border and went into Burma. And so we were just, we went about with everything we were doing, and I was just taking it all in and journaling the whole time. And so when we came home, I just kept thinking about it, about how he had said it didn't exist. And I'm a little bit of a researcher, not by education as far as anybody training me. I'm just, I guess, in other terms, I'm just really nosy and curious. Uh-huh. So I just started looking it up and started looking to find out, why had we heard that it was, happening, and then he had said it didn't. Mm-hmm. And what I found just broke my heart. The stories that I found of children that would be sold into those situations by their own family members, because of poverty, and then the organizations that were working to free people, and the human trafficking for so many different reasons. Grown men who would go on what they thought was a job interview, and they would end up literally taken as slaves to work on the shipping boats.
Oh.
Just to provide seafood.
Wow.
And and it was so sad to watch these, there was just thousands of stories out there, videos and then written stories just on the internet, just telling about, how family members would think that, that people were running away, or these men had abandoned their families, when in actuality they were literally taken as slaves.
Wow. Because you hear about human trafficking, and it always seems to be about children, almost always about children.
Right. And it's genuinely, true that children are obviously, a bigger target because an adult can, reason their way out of things. But I think that it happens to adults as well. A lot of times it's people that are not educated. They're just easily fooled into thinking that they've signed contracts or that they owe money. And so it happens. Slavery has just been a part of our, sadly, it's just been a part of who we are as people.
Yeah, very sad. Yeah.
For so long. And so, so, just learning more about that, that kind of became what I was interested in. And so the very first scene that I sat down to write, is actually the prologue to the book. And it's been difficult for some people because they'll read that and they read of a 9-year-old Burmese girl and what that's like. I'm sorry, I just got emotional.
No, it's understandable.
But what that's like but I really felt like I couldn't write about something this serious and ignore what the plight of what that would be like for someone to be in that situation. I wanted to write the story of the woman and what she went through and her search for significance and to do something significant with her life and how that is such a motivator for so many American women, especially that we want to do something significant and we can't put our finger on what that might be. And for her, she definitely took a real life journey. She got on an airplane and she went on a journey to figure out what that was for her. But I think for many of us, we go on more of a spiritual journey to figure out, what significance really means. And so for her, she kind of had to travel far away to go on that spiritual journey. But it was a good adventure.
Great.
And of course, and then choosing Thailand was just a natural. I had just been there and I was just so enamored with everything about it that I literally, in the book, every place that the characters go is a place that we actually went to.
Oh, good. That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, it was really fun. And it was neat to learn about the history even after I came home and to be able to incorporate that. And so, so
that's where your journaling came in handy, having that.
It did come in handy. And so now I just have to figure out where I want to go next so that I can write a book about that.
Yeah. Well, in some ways I can see how it would be very, I got to go, I have to get this story out. This is such an important story to be told, and that would bring excitement. But at other times I would see maybe it was kind of depressing writing this at the same time when you're reading all the stories.
I think that it's just like any adventure that we get into. You get pulled into it, and I knew it wasn't really happening. The little girl's name is Noi, and I knew it really wasn't happening to her because it was happening, in my head and it was coming out. But I think it was more of a surprise than anything else. Okay. I've never been in a situation where someone has hurt me in that way. And so to see those things come out in my writing was a little alarming because I thought, well, this is really odd. Why, but I can't, having a really good editor helps you sell it later.
Okay.
Because with the very first editor that I had, that was one of the things that she was so good about, is just making me understand, what do children do when they're in that situation?
Oh, okay.
And, one of the first things she did when she agreed to take me, I had hired a freelance editor. And one of the first things she said to me was, she asked me if I had ever read the book Room. I can't remember the author right now. I want to say Donahue. But it's a story of a little boy who's, a prisoner in a room. And she said, your writing is very much like this author. And so I thought, well, I'm already done. So I'm with feeling like I'm going to copy. So I went and got the book and I read it. And so then as the editor talked me through it, she reminded me that, children will go someplace to protect themselves, in their mind.
Yeah.
When that's happening. And so while I hadn't had that experience, again, that's when you have a great editor that can just, just not just pull out the holes that are obvious to everyone, but really look underneath the surface of, if this person's going to be believable, this little girl, how does she actually cope with that? And so, I think that was one of the most amazing experiences for me was working with an editor, a really good editor.
And how did you find your editor?
This is honestly what had happened was I had written the book in 2011, 2012. It was pretty much Easter of 2012 I was done. And I put it away, which is what they say you should do. Well, I didn't take it back out until 2015.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Which is a little long, but, we had some other stuff going on, and so it just wasn't the priority. So when I took it out in 2015, I thought, I'm going to self-publish this. And so I started an Indiegogo fundraiser, and I did it. Yeah, I had a blog following, and so I had been doing other types of writing. And so just more of a lifestyle blog. And so I had a little bit of a following. And so I, put it out there to my followers. I'm doing an Indiegogo fundraiser. I'm going to, self-publish this book. So I started to raise money, and I could kind of figure out how much I was going to, end up with when the fundraiser was done. And so I went on to outsource.com, and I just, it was pretty simple. You just ran, that you were looking for an editor for a fictional manuscript. So within the first day, I got 20 solicitations.
Wow.
Yeah, 20 editors want to work with you. Well, of course, because they're freelance editors and they want the work. And so then what I did is I started looking at what I wanted in an editor. And, that narrowed it down a little bit. And so I had narrowed it down to some different editors. And then I had asked them if they would take a portion of my work and show me what they could do. And so there were 3 different editors, and I sent them just some of my papers and, not much, but just a little bit just to have them, respond. And then it was clear. And of course it was the most expensive editor that what she could do. It was so obvious that she was going to not just be looking at my, my grammar and my sentence structures, but that she was looking at the heart of it. And I really wanted that because and so of course I wanted her. So then what happened was I sat down looking at the money I was raising, and so my husband and I talked about it, and we decided that, I forgot. The other thing that came back is all 3 of them said, why are you self-publishing? Like, why are you not looking for a publisher? Like, this is really good. Okay. And so I thought, okay, well, that's odd that all 3 are saying that.
It is, because it's taking money out of their pocket, potentially.
Right. And so I decided to use the money that I had done for the Indiegogo fundraiser to pay for the expensive freelance editor. And then I just wrote to the people who had been donating and told them we're going with a new plan. And you donated for me to do self-publishing, but I'm not going to self-publish. You're still going to get your free books. Right, yeah. I'm going to self-publish. I'm going to use a freelance editor, and I'm going to work really hard to try and find an actual publisher.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, because I think a lot of times when people are looking for editors, they don't know what to do. How do I choose which editor? So I like how you had a plan, and you got to see their work. That's good. That was thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that.
And it's a good idea to send just a little bit and say, here, what can you do with this? Instead of, well, I like your response to my email, so here's my whole book. Knock yourself out. Right. Yeah. So can I ask you about the Indiegogo fundraiser? What were you, how did that work? And what were you offering people to entice them to donate to your cause?
Well, I mean, again, this was based on my blog following. So a lot of the people had, an attachment to me by this point. So some of them were things such as, you would get a book and you could have coffee with, with me.
Oh,
like you could have coffee and a book. And that was, if you lived I live in California. And so I think only one person chose that. And then later when I sent her book and contacted her about coffee, she was too busy.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty humbling, but hey, that's fine because, I appreciate so much just the support. Mm-hmm. But I offered people copies of the books, just different ways they could have a copy. They could get it, an e-copy or a paperback. In the end, I ended up sending every person that had donated the actual book and not, the e version, because I couldn't figure out how to make that happen. So I just did that.
It's easier to send the book.
Well, that's interesting also, because Matt will say, because I wrote a book, but I need an illustrator. I'm like, I don't have the money to pay for an illustrator, blah, blah, blah. And Matt's like, go fund me or whatever.
Right,
and I'm like,
sure.
who is going to donate? So people who didn't know you donated.
Yes. People who did not know me, they would give anywhere from $10 to $20 and, with that, pledge that they were going to get a book. And I was just hoping that, and that was a little scary later because, I didn't know the outcome, and it was kind of a burden that was there. What if I can't get a publisher,
Okay, I see, yes.
So you're taking people's money, but you're not sure you can live up.
Right.
That your end is going to come through, right?
Right. But some of the larger supporters were just people who, just loved my family and my husband and I, and they, obviously would have understood if it had never come to fruition. And my husband just kept reminding me, if worse comes to worse, we'll self-publish,
Okay.
But, as an author, I think that you want someone else to believe in it. I think that self-publishing is awesome, but I think that we all, want someone to choose us.
Sure.
Just to kind of say, like, yeah, of course, we're so grateful for the people, and it was a joy to be able to send them out the books.
Oh, I bet. How fun.
Right.
To autograph them and then to hear back from them and to have those conversations. And so that was, it was great. It was a great experience.
Well, congratulations for getting people to help and for making it come true. That's great.
Yeah.
So what about the writing process? Did you ever say, I just can't do this? Or was it just easy going the whole time?
Oh, no, of course. Every single time. I sat down to write it, and actually for my first draft, I actually wrote the first draft in 7 weeks.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I wasn't working at the time, and I was a little OCD, and so I would just keep writing and writing and writing, and then I would stop and I would go for a hike with my daughter. And I know you're not supposed to really talk about what's happening, and so I didn't want to go into too much detail, but I would just tell her, like, I just don't know what's going to happen, and I would even be fearful that, like, that was it. Like, and I did some things backwards, and I learned. One of the first scenes that I wrote was a climactic scene that wasn't going to take place until near the end of the book. And so there was all of this time where I was like, how am I going to get, like, I knew I had to get these people to this certain place to make this thing happen. And that's just not how you're supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I learned the hard way, I guess you could say, or the fun way. I learned not to do it that way again, like not to have, ideas or things that I'm trying to make happen, because it was such an added burden. Going back through it with the editor again, that was crazy, because I thought, how is this going to happen? How am I going to rewrite something that I already wrote? And so, but that was super exciting, because I wouldn't want anyone to read the first draft now, because I learned so many things about the characters and changed so many things about them in that editing process. Huh. Oh yeah, and I did not expect that to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So you obviously had an extremely positive experience with this editor. That's wonderful.
She just really pushed me. I won't give away too much, but I think it says on the back of the book, that, the main character, Kimley, is at a breaking point in her marriage. Well, when I wrote the book, I hadn't even gone into too much detail about what was wrong in the marriage. Okay. I had been very vague about it. And she really pushed me on that. And she really, you can't, that's cheating. You have to make those choices. And so it was very, very different, because so in my mind, I had one idea of what I thought the problem was with for Kimley and in her marriage.
Okay.
And then when I sat down to write, it was something else.
Huh.
Something else came out entirely, and it was really good experience. And then even just really pushing me socially. I had not meant to do it, but when I wrote the first draft, I'm Caucasian, and unintentionally, I had written a book where all the people who came in to save the day were Caucasian. They were all basically American. And I realized one day I sent a text message to my family thread, because I have, 3 adult children.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh my gosh, I'm racist. And they were, of course, stunned. And they were like, what? You're not racist.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't mean to do it, but it hit me. It occurred to me that I had done this. And so I had to do a major overhaul on one of the main characters, to turn him from a white man into a Thai man. Okay. And that was a writing process that was really stretching. I wouldn't trade it for the world now, but because it was at first, my first instinct was, well, I'll just do, find on my computer, and every time it says Mike, I'll change his name to Dakum, problem solved. Uh-huh. Well, there's a huge difference between, a white man raised in America and a Thai man raised in Thailand.
Sure.
And so to really go in and learn, like, what would he talk like? What would be some of the things that his slang, so to speak, would he use? And then what was his story? Like, who was this man now? Like, he was somebody different entirely. Right. And so I wouldn't trade that for anything, because just, writers know that, oh gosh, Anne Lamott says that if you are writing because you want to get published, you're never going to be happy. You have to write because you love writing. Okay. And I didn't understand that before this, because I felt like, yeah, but everybody wants to get published. So that's just one of those things that people say. Okay. Yeah. But then after going through it, I realized that I understood what she meant, because that was my experience with the book, was the writing part. Well, when somebody else reads it, that's their experience. I'm not there for that. Mm-hmm. I'm at home with my family cooking, or I'm at work, doing whatever I do, and they're experiencing it. I don't get to be there with them. So my experience is when I'm writing. And so if I don't enjoy that process, there's no point in it.
Right. But that must have been a huge process to change, to change the character after you had written the book.
Well, it was. Because the first character had said he had all these little American sayings, like looking for a needle in a haystack, and just little things like that. And I kind of envisioned this, Kevin Costner type guy. And all of a sudden he's Thai, and he can't say those same things. He can't make
right.
quirky comments. And so I went and I found Thai sayings that were common in Thai. That would make no sense to us. And then I found, translation guides that helped me to understand, why would someone say this? Like looking at, I think there was one phrase about looking at the backside of a leaf as gold or something. And it was basically, that your what we would say is counting your eggs before they're hatched. Oh, okay. So it was things like that, just kind of understanding what those meant. And so it was a huge undertaking. But again, I was just, at the time, my husband and I were in an empty nest. And so this was my hobby. And that's what I just did until it was done.
So I don't think we covered finding the publisher.
Yes.
How did you go about doing that? I mean, we were at you found an editor, and then the lady was great, and she changed it, gave you lots of insight.
Yeah.
And then how did it end up going from self-publishing to?
I just sat on my computer and looked, and I would type in publishers and just start looking. And I found, again, so many of the things that happened for me was that I found out how many things that I did backwards. And so then I would find publishers and I would think, oh, this one looks really interesting, and I would read about what they were accepting. And some of them, they didn't want anything that dealt with anything rape, anything like that. And so it was oh, okay, so they're not going to read my stuff. I found out, right off the bat, So I found what I my experience for many months was that I had written something that was unpublishable.
Ooh.
And I was pretty sad because my book is very spiritual. And so a lot of the secular publishers that I would find, they didn't want to touch anything that had any Christian themes to it. And so because my book had Christian themes, they weren't really interested. And so then I would go looking at Christian publishers, and they didn't want to touch anything that had anything to do with molestation or rape or sex trafficking. These things were just not, they didn't want it. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I wrote like a book that no one's going to ever want. And so, but I just kept looking, and I started entering contests. There were many contests that you could find. I just kept Googling it, and I found websites that would tell you about contests, and some of the prizes, if you won, would be that you would get published. And so
okay.
I would just query them, whatever it was that they took. And, each one, it's always different. It's like, one might say send the first, 50 pages, where the next one might say send the first 2 chapters. And then I just kept querying them and doing it. And I found one website had a list of publishers. And so my publisher starts with the letter K. So I got that far into the alphabet, that many rejections. The first few rejections, of course, were, kind of mentionable to family and friends. And then they were coming that it wasn't even something I would tell people, because it was like, well, I got another rejection, but, I was working as a waitress at the time. And so I worked with an amazing group of people in a Mexican restaurant, and they were so supportive, and they would just tell me, it's gonna happen. And customers too, they would leave a tip, and they would write a little note on there. So those little things, I think it's so important as an author that you let people in, and that you tell people what you're doing, and because everyone roots for you. Okay. I really felt like people root for you, and you need to let people in so they know what you're going through. They know that, you're not just being a recluse. You're doing something different. And then
good
one
advice.
Day,
good advice.
Yeah, and I believe it's true. You've got to let people in and tell them what because it is very hard to get that many rejections, and you don't need to go through it alone, because people are on your side.
Okay.
And then one night I'm sitting watching a movie with my husband and my son, and the email came in, we want to see more, and
wow.
you just
Wow.
And then I sent them more, and then I didn't hear anything. And then I think I was at Disneyland when I got an email from Karras Publishing, and they were unique, which I didn't know. I hadn't paid that much attention to why they were unique, but they were unique in that they had a Christian worldview. But you don't have to have a Christian book per se. Okay. But they were looking for books that told stories that were, inspiring. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. And so they said, send us just 2 more chapters. 2 chapters, that's it. Don't send more. And so I sent those, and I thought, well, I'll never hear from them again. But that, at least we made our first, someone's actually wants more. Well, it was within an hour they contacted me.
Oh,
and said,
wow. That's
yes.
wonderful.
Yeah. They emailed me right back and said, send it all.
Wow.
And
what a feeling.
It was so amazing. And then they offered a contract, and then we began a whole nother journey of, title changes and picking out a cover and just things like that were super exciting, but super scary at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And did you have a lot of control in that situation?
They were really good with that. And the thing that's unique about Karras, I said they were unique, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that publishing company, but for every book they sell, they donate $1 to an orphanage in Uganda.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. The founder of the publishing company, he was raised in that environment, and he feels that it was reading that saved him. Oh. He would walk 3 miles for water every day, and he had these 2 older men who would give him books, and they would tell him, read these books and then write a little report about it. And today that man, Frank Umercy, I probably said his name wrong, he's the founder of Karras Publishing, and he's also a professor at John Brown University in Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so he's just made it his mission that he wanted to start a publishing company that would give back to these orphanages. Wow. And so I just loved that idea, because I thought, I wrote this book I used these stories of these children who were, basically, they're marginalized in our society. And so the idea that the book could go for something good was just, more than I could have asked for.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, what a wonderful man. And what about marketing?
Marketing is hard.
That's what we hear.
It's so time consuming, and it's really hard because it plays with you again. It's almost like it's like getting rejected again, because if you don't do it right, you don't get much response. Now social media runs on such strong algorithms that your little ad that you make could get lost, because if people don't click on it early on in the life of your whatever you're selling, but in the life of your book, they may never see it.
Right.
Because it just gets pushed down because somebody put up a video of a puppy.
So besides Facebook, are you using Instagram or anything else?
Yes, I use Instagram. I have a Twitter account, but I don't use it as faithfully, and I have a Pinterest. But it's definitely Instagram is the one that I get the most response from. With Facebook, I will, my mom will always like it. Some close friends will always see it, but with Instagram, it seems like it's the most because of the hashtags. You have to use hashtags. If you're not using hashtags, you're not seeing people. But use the hashtag books or hashtag fictional characters, whatever it is. That one definitely gets a lot of exposure on Instagram or Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't know about ads on Instagram.
Oh yeah. Instagram too. It has to be an author account, like a business account. Okay. It can't be your personal one. But for as low as you can run an ad for $5. It's nice that the social media has those things, because it makes it possible for people, who are not, you're not Stephen King, so you're not going to get this marketing, and so you got to do it yourself, and so you do what you can do. And I have, tried to look at what works. For whatever reason, if I put up a picture of my husband and I with the books, people get really happy. And so that will get a lot more likes and a lot more exposure. And so it's just finding what people likes and keeping it real. But then also for me, it's just been about not letting it get me down, and because that, I don't want the marketing and how hard the marketing is to destroy, what the book is.
Right. Well, Jackie, do you have any advice for other authors who might be listening to this interview?
Just write it out. I really think, get that first draft out and then walk away from it, and then just come back and edit it. And I was really afraid of the editing, because I thought, well, how can you rewrite something that you already wrote? But I love editing now. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. And I'm in college. I actually, I work for Starbucks, and Starbucks pays for your college.
Oh, congratulations.
That is great.
And so I figured since I hadn't written a book, I should probably learn more. And so I'm studying English, and I have 2 years left, and then I'll be an English teacher. And so I think it's just write it out, because because honestly, even if I had never taken it out, and I might not have if my husband hadn't been so encouraging to me in that, I think there was something to be gained even in just writing a whole story like that. Like there's something gained as an author, as a writer.
And what about personally also, I would think?
Oh, yes, definitely. I learned a lot, especially in the editing process. I learned a great deal about myself, and even confronted some of the choices that I had made over the years, and having to deal with what that really meant. And so I think I don't have any illusions that I've written any great literature, but I do think that there's something to be said for finishing a first draft, for doing the editing, for finding a publisher. Just the perseverance that takes does change a person, and it does make you a little bit different than you were when you started.
Mm-hmm.
And you really learned a lot by rearranging the character, making them a different, a different character.
I did.
Yeah.
I learned some pie.
Right. So congratulations.
Well, Jackie, how's a good way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
Well, I have my email address. Do you want me to say it or?
Sure, and then we'll just put it in the show notes so you can just...
I have my email address, which is JackieSill0693@gmail.com. I'm on Instagram probably too often, and and that's just at Jacquelyn Sill. And I have an author page on Facebook, which is Jacquelyn Sill. The book is available at KarrasPublishing.com. That's probably the best way to get the book. Karras is it's spelled a little bit differently. It's KHARIS publishing.com.
Okay, thank you.
And then it's also available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com.
It seems like a lot of authors say, if you can, though, please purchase it through the publishing company.
It definitely works better if you purchase it through the publishing company. It works better for them and for me, and especially for them with the way that they do the donation for the orphanage.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
You know, and so so it's definitely better for everyone if you go straight to the publisher. But some people, you know, they like to do the Amazon.
Sure.
And it's available in ebook that way too, so people like that.
All right. Well, Jackie, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing your story. You've been very inspirational to us.
Right. And you had a lot of good stories.
Right.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. If there's a particular episode that you really like of The Author Inside You, please consider
leaving us a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Author Inside You podcast. And until next time,
right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.